She's going to come in at some point. Yeah, so I was just thinking back really to the first time that I sort of came across Triratna, the Triratna Buddhist community. And one of the things that I really appreciated very much about it was that people practicing within it, both order members and mitras and just everyone within this community, there was such a range of backgrounds, lifestyles, different sort of focuses within practice, within different practitioners. And I remember being in the ordination process, and I just found it really moving that I could go to different parts of the country and meet people within Triratna, and even go to different countries. And there was a familiarity to people that were practicing within Triratna. So there was something familiar, but there was also something very, very different and unique about each person that I met. So a whole manner of different personalities, different lifestyles, different practices, I was saying. Yeah. Yeah, so within this particular community in Triratna, Sangha, the founder, in a way, he sort of drew out that within Buddhism, the central act for a Buddhist is to go for refuge to the three jewels. So Kusaladevi mentioned that earlier this evening. So the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So in a way, taking them as your sort of guiding principles, practices, turning to those three jewels rather than turning to false refuges. And in this way, Sangha saw that it's possible to practice the Dharma just in a whole range of different lifestyles. So he saw that you don't need to be a monk or a nun for your commitment to be taken seriously as a Buddhist practitioner. So that's why one of the reasons that our order is not a monastic order. I think Sangha recognises, and so therefore order members recognise that going for refuge isn't just a formality. It's not just something that you do. You don't just take the refuges and precepts, but actually it's about a reorientation of your life around those very central, precious jewels. And that's not just within ordination, that's within Buddhist practice more broadly. So in a way that anyone that makes a commitment within our community is sort of, doing that similar thing, really, reorienting our lives around the three jewels, which is just quite a beautiful image. In a way, there's the image of a mandala and having the three jewels at that center of the mandala and sort of orienting your life around that in a way. And that can just look very different for different people. Yeah. So I'm just going to read a bit of what Sangha says. So he says, the real difference is not between monks and lay people, but between those who go for refuge and those who do not go for refuge. Whether you are a monk who goes for refuge or a layman who goes for refuge is of secondary importance. That you live in a certain kind of way or follow a certain discipline is of secondary importance. What is of overriding importance is your common spiritual commitment, your common going for refuge. So this is why in Triratna, although it wasn't Triratna then, it was the FWBO, we have a sort of saying or slogan, going for refuge or commitment is primary, lifestyle is secondary. So a bit later, a few years later, I don't know when it was, but Sangha did add that, yes, going for refuge is primary and lifestyle is secondary. And then he added, but not unimportant. So, of course, our lifestyle is also important if it's in line with the three jewels. So we wanted to have this series really around Triratna more broadly, and hopefully we will sort of unfold that over the next few weeks. But to start this evening, we thought that a good way of starting was just to explore three different order members within our Sangha, who you'll know well, and how they express their commitment in different contexts and different lifestyles. So we're going to hear around particular areas. We'll hear first from Abhirati, who's going to talk about living in the community. I don't know if he'll talk about working at the centre as well, but we'll see. He'll talk about whatever he wants to. Then we'll hear from Jyotida, who will talk about commitment within the family life, living the household family life. And then we'll hear from Padmasakhi about becoming an anagarika. And I'm not going to say anything about that. I'm going to leave Padmasakhi to say more about that at the end. But that's something that is a recent commitment for her. And it's a real pleasure that she'll be able to speak to us. Yeah. So firstly, yeah, I'll hand over to Aryabharchin. And we were in the centre today having a meeting for the team meeting, those of us that work at the centre, for the first time for months and months. It was only my second ever meeting there. So I started as chair in October and had one, and then we had to work from home. So it was such a delight to be around people again. And yeah, it was a real delight to be around Aryabharchin and to see him within that building. You know, he lives there, he works there. So that building is a sort of very central part of his life. And it was lovely to see him looking at home within the centre. So yeah, looking forward to hear what you've got to say, Aryabharchin.
Thank you very much, dear Kusaladevi. And yeah, very good to see so many of you tonight joining us. So I'm going to be doing a bit of switching my gaze in between the camera that is in the front and the screen that is down here. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking at you actually. So yes, I like Kusaladevi just did, in thinking about tonight, I was recollecting my first encounter with Triratna back in Merida, in my hometown in Venezuela. I was 19 years old, and I was searching, you know, as many people that come along our centers, and I came across this not just a Buddhist center, but a small community of people living together in this house in a part of the town, an old part of the town in Merida. And it was an interesting journey. I was 19 years old, as I say, but I was a bit of on and off, you know, coming to the center on and off for a few months, very hot, very intense with my practice, and then just disappearing for a few other months. And then at some point, I had a very strong experience on a weekend retreat in that center. Something similar to what we used to do here in Nottingham when we could, you know, the bed and breakfast weekend retreats where we hosted people at the center. And I was staying in that building, in the Merida Buddhist Center building for the weekend. And I had a very strong experience, a sort of a, you could say, visionary experience of seeing my life in a perspective that was a bit outside ordinary time, you know, and space. I'm currently reading a bit about William Blake, who is a bit of a hero of mine, literary hero of mine. And something I really enjoy about the life of Blake is that he used to have these visions, you know, very spontaneous visions in relation to the world around him, you know, very ordinary things, like, for example, walking in London and suddenly seeing a tree full of angels, yeah? Or at four years old, seeing God looking through the window in his house. So that was interesting for me because it really broke, having that experience, that sort of a visionary experience, you know, which I couldn't quite explain in terms of ordinary consciousness. You know, that experience really sort of broke something in the way I was looking at my life, you know, and the direction that I was taking with my life. As a result of that, I decided to ask to the guys in the community if I could move to that place, just temporary, just while I sort of make sense of all the changes that were going on in my life. There were very big things happening for me, so I was in the process of getting married, apparently. At the time, I was in a very difficult situation at work, you know, with sort of my job hanging a bit, and not a very clear future professionally. Yeah, and I sort of, I was looking for something a bit more reliable, dependable, you know. to engage with. So I moved to a men's community at 22. This was in 2002, so 19 years ago, and that was my first community. And what I was thinking to share tonight was a bit of that story of my journey, and also talk a bit about communities in general. So this first part of what I'm going to share with you is very personal. Yeah. So, and it was quite an experience, being a young man in Venezuela with sort of a very clear role in society and within my family, and suddenly being surrounded by other men in a way that I never been with men before. Yeah? So there weren't any formalities in the communication. There was sort of a very open space, and so people really talking about their journeys, their thinking, their emotions, yeah, their struggles, in a way that I never experienced before in my life, and that was scary. Yeah. So after 4 weeks of being in that context, I made excuses and I went back to my mother's flat. Yeah, with the main excuse was that I needed to look after my brother, who is 7 years younger than me. It was quite the opposite. So it was more like my brother was looking after me, because I just went back. I just didn't go back to the flat where my mother was living. But I went back to sort of old habits and old tendencies. Yeah. And my brother, who was starting to become an adult, he was a bit more responsible and more sort of already taking more independence and initiative in his life. So at some point, I needed to look at what I was doing, and I consciously decided that I was going to engage with that project of living in community, and no matter the outcome of that, yeah, I will engage with it. So that second movement towards the community started that process of me living there in that space, with different arrangements of people, but more or less with the same 2 or 3 friends for a number of years, 6 years. And that was my first community, and my initiation, if you want, into the life that I'm living today. So I was recollecting some points of that engagement that were very important to me. One that was very important to me was realizing that ordination was something in this community, that you could engage fully, and at some point you will be able to change your name. I don't know why that had a real lure for me at the time, and I feel later on, when I discover, I don't know if you have heard of the myth of or the legend of Parsifal, yeah, that this idea of Parsifal that has been living with his mother in a hut, so in a field, and suddenly one day he's been sort of a very shelter, and suddenly one day he sees these knights riding horses passing by, yeah, and immediately there is a sort of a hard response, that he knows that that's his lineage, if you want, that he belongs to that. So for me, it was a bit like that, just discovering that ordination was possible. That was something called ordination, and that you could do something like that. You could change your life in that way. I didn't have a clue of what Triratna was at the time. I mean, the only thing that I knew was that little center in Merida, that little community. I haven't seen any other order member. I haven't seen, apart from the one that I made contact with at the beginning of my journey. I'm going to say a bit more about him in a moment. And I never knew anything about all the sort of infrastructure, if you want, that we have here in the UK. Retreat centers, team-based right livelihoods, etc. And much of that movement was towards something that I didn't quite know. It wasn't quite obvious to me, but I was responding to. So sort of, in a way, you could say that I was awakening to my own potential. Yeah. And that was a very sort of beautiful and difficult, painful sometimes journey, of revealing that potential, unfolding of that potential. But something very important that happened in that context was the development of friendships. Yeah? So, and that's why I felt it's important to share with you a bit of my journey, because you don't have in Buddhism, you don't encounter disembodied entities. Yeah? So you cannot talk of a community in abstraction. Yeah? If you're going to talk of a community, you need to talk of a specific community. And communities are living creatures. Yeah? They are alive. I'm going to say a bit more about the community that we have here in Nottingham towards the end of this little talk. But yeah, friendship was very important, and making a connection, particularly with this order member. He's not part of the order any longer. His name is Manjunatha. But just discovering a whole new dimension of linking your life with another person. Yeah? So he became a bit of a mentor figure for me. I remember very well that at that time, Venezuela, Merida particularly, was a very safe place. So we used to go, for example, to the cinema after our community night, finishing community night around 9 p.m., 9:30 p.m., and then walking to the cinema just to see the last screening of the night, and then walking back to the community, and arriving in the community around 3 in the morning and just chatting, and talking, and or just after a community night, just going to his room and chatting, and staying until past midnight, talking. And it was sort of a very encouraging, affirming relationship. Yeah, there was so much encouragement coming from him, so much trust and love and care. Yeah. That it really gave me the fuel, if you want, to take on or to take off from Venezuela at some point. I'm not going to say any more about that. Just that, something that happens in community is very in line with the Buddhist tradition. So the Buddhist tradition has been mostly an oral tradition. Yeah. It has been passed through generation after generation of practitioners through communicating, live communication, between two people. It's a very recent phenomenon in the Buddhist tradition that we rely so much on text. Yeah? We rely so much on disembodied entities, if you want. So, and some of you probably know by experience that just by reading a book, or just by listening to a guided meditation, or just to seeing a video of somebody talking about a particular aspect of Buddhism is not enough. You feel like you need something else. So that living connection with that legacy, the legacy that the Buddha left for us, is something very important. And we have different expressions of that in Triratna, within our tradition. So Triratna is a living tradition. It's not a Buddhist society. It's not something that we come together just to talk about the last thing that we read in a book. It's something where we are talking, engaging actively with our entanglements, our mess in progress, as some people call it in Triratna. Yeah, and it can be messy, it can be difficult, but also it's an expression, is potentially an expression of insight, yeah, of a way of cultivating selflessness. Yeah. So living together, working together, as Kusaladevi mentioned earlier as well. So I just don't live in the community here. I work with at least one other person from the community, Gareth. We work together, and then Kusaladevi and Kemasiri and Padmasakhi, we work very closely together for the center. And that's another area where we are in a way going beyond ourselves. Yeah? It's actively, there is a potential for us to go deeper in an understanding of reality, our relationship with reality. So I feel that's very important. It's something that we need to keep investing in. So communities are living creatures, as I say before. So communities are always changing. You need to keep a very fine, ear to. And my relationship with communities is quite intuitive. So I've been in many different communities. I was in that first community in Venezuela for 6 years. Then I moved to Cambridge, and I was in Cambridge for 7.5 years, 8.5 years, 7.5 working for Winners. And I was in 3 different communities in Cambridge. Yeah. But within the same community, within the same building, you can see different incarnations, if you want, of a community. Yeah. So the community that we have here at the Nottingham Buddhist Center is called Abhirati. So Jill was asking me earlier on in the tea break what Abhirati means. So it can be translated as sheer delight. And it's the Buddha land or the Buddha field of the blue Buddha, Akshobhya, yeah, the Buddha of the East. And it's a name that was given to us by our president, Ratnagosha, which has a very, very added important meaning to it, yeah? Because in a way, it's an expression of Kalyana Mitrata, yeah? Of spiritual friendship. So Ratnagosha is a person within Triratna that has lived most of his life in communities. Yeah? I met Ratnagosha in Cambridge when I arrived in Cambridge. He was living in a particular community, but then he moved to the community that he is at the moment, Padmakula. So there are a few communities in the movement that have names. Yeah? Some of them have been named by a friend, a spiritual teacher, a spiritual influence, like Ratnagosha to us here in Nottingham. So Padmakula is one of those communities that's been there for a long time in Cambridge. We have, for example, in London, we have a couple of communities that have been, over the years. There are like this one in part of the building of the London Buddhist Center. So Sukhavati and Samagabasa. And like that, many other communities, around the movement. So communities can have a bit of a personality as well. So they're living beings, as I said before. And it depends a lot of the configuration of the people that are there together. It depends on in what particular part of their journey they are in. So there are periods where there is a lot more of intensity in that process of living together, and there are periods where there is a bit more of a sort of regrouping and just sort of redefining, what is the purpose of living together. Yeah. So here in Abhirati at the moment, we are going through a phase like that. We have recently we have Connor moving in, who just last Thursday became a full member of the community. So we had a bit of a trial period where both of us were trying things out. So Connor was trying us out, and we were sort of having an experience of him being in the community. And we are very happy that Connor is with us in the community. And Zach moved nearly a year ago as well in the community. So we have 2 sort of new community members that are full of energy and full of enthusiasm and full of a desire, real desire, sincere desire of making this work. Yeah. But something that I've been doing in the last year, with all these lockdowns and the quarantine and the pandemic, as probably many of you have, is growing an indoors garden. Yeah. So I've been putting a bit of effort into rooting myself a bit more in this building. My relationship with this building is a bit difficult, but I'm consciously, working in making it more and more my home. Yeah. So I have a little indoors garden in the top floor here in this building. And those plants are a real source of inspiration for me, you know. And something that I've been learning, you know, I think in the past I was quite connected with the myth of the hero, you know, and sort of a very heroic aspect of my practice. So in the last year, I've been exploring more the myth of the gardener, yeah, if you want. And something I've been learning is that plants, they have their rhythms, you know, and they have, even I would dare to say that they have personalities, you know. So I'm starting to know my plants a bit better. And I was thinking that community can be like that a bit. It's a bit like a garden, you know. And so you have different plants, you have people with different needs and different ways of unfolding. Yeah? So, for example, in my garden upstairs, I have a spider plant, you know, which is huge. It's all the time thirsty, yeah? But it is giving a lot, yeah? And it's abundant, and it has many small plants growing. You know, it takes a lot of space, but it's bringing a lot as well. You know, it has a sort of a strong presence, if you want. I have some orchids, you know, in my garden, my little garden upstairs. And orchids are very peculiar, you know. They do blossom, but they blossom on their own terms. Yeah? So you need to wait. Don't give up on an orchid, you know, because sooner or later they're going to surprise you, yeah? And something is coming. So at the moment, I have the delight of 2 orchids that look like they were going to die, just suddenly poof, exploding with flowers. Yeah? And I have a wandering yew, I think you call it, which is hanging from the ceiling, and it's so exuberant, you know, and it doesn't require much. You know, it doesn't require much water, it doesn't require much care, but it's just giving. It's giving a lot. Beautiful colors, you know. It's just that presence again, you know, of hanging from the ceiling to the floor. So I could make parallels with some of the people that I'm living with. I'm not going to, though. I'll leave it to you if you want to do that. But it's a bit like that, you know. Just communities are very fragile, actually. You know, it's like a plant as well. You know, they need care. They need communities need effort. Yeah. So I thought that just to finish, I wanted to share with you. On preparing for this, I was looking at a couple of papers from 2 other members who have a lot of experience living in communities. One of them is Ratna Gosha, who put together a little paper about communities called "Not Just Another Lifestyle." It's an interesting title, which is at the same time is a bit of a statement. Yeah? And then there's another other member called Amala Vajra, who is the director of Future Dharma Fund. It's a very successful fundraiser in our community, in our Triratna wider community. And he put together a little paper called 5 Qualities of Successful Triratna Communities and how they arise. Yeah? So like plants, like a garden, you know, a garden can be very successful, can be very, very beautiful, but as well can go wrong, you know. And I really like this bit. I wanted to read this to you, you know, just a paragraph from Amala Vajra. And then I close with something that my friend Zach put together. So he said, without conscious effort, communities seem to naturally degrade into, at best, friendly but essentially individualistic shared lodgings, where one can live inexpensively and do as one pleases, albeit without inconveniencing your fellows. In a way, it is the worst of both worlds. You can control your environment as when you live alone, nor do you find much real connection. Whilst some people may be happy living long term in this way, and they will be in the minority and remain so. And such communities will also offer little in the way of the positive intensity that can transform us through the Dharma. So I wanted to mention this because Abhirati community is important not just for the people that are living here in this community. It's important for the Nottingham Sangha. Yeah. It's important for the whole of the movement. Communities are shrinking, are starting to disappear. So there is less and less possibilities of people living in communities in the movement. There are less and less possibilities of people working together within the movement. So we need to be, I mean, it's not just up to the people that are living together or working together. You know, I think it's a responsibility, it's a collective responsibility of all of us. You know? And that's a process that requires effort. You know, it requires intelligent effort. The effort that goes into developing connections, friendship. So I just want to read something that my friend Zach have put together. It's an area that we are discussing at the moment in Abhirati community about four qualities or four principles that we can try to cultivate together. You know? So the first one is care, you know, that sense of caring for each other, reminding ourselves of the importance of looking after each other, you know, when we live together. The second is an active chair going for refuge. So we have a very beautiful introduction from Kusaladevi around the whole area of going for refuge, you know. And that commonality in that aspiration is very important for us living together. The third is common projects. So I really like, you know, that in our Sangha is so abundant in energy. You know, so we have a team, the maintenance team for our Sangha with Keith, Vanessa, Ed, the guys in the community, Richard, Connor, Zach, Gareth, they also help. I just did my last job for the Lokapalas team, the maintenance team, yesterday. So the Lokapalas as the guardian of the place, yeah. But the community, the guys here living in Abhirati community, we see ourselves as the stewards, you know, the sort of, if you want the gatekeepers of the center. So it's something about us owning the building in a particular way, you know, service in the building. And finally, friendship from this list of Zach. So friendship is something active, you know, it's something that is constantly changing, as you probably know. I think I spoke more than 15 minutes, so sorry, Kusaladevi, and that I leave it there.
Great, thank you very much. And particularly enjoyed that metaphor of the garden. I think that's really beautiful and appropriate for the different beings that can be living together in community and what their different needs are and how they manifest, how they grow. Yeah, really beautiful. Thank you. So I'm going to just suggest that we take like literally a 30-second leg stretch. So we might just want to sort of have a little walk around the room and then we'll sit again and come in here, Jyotida. Okay, good. So yeah, I was thinking about Jyotida. I'm not going to say too much because I want to give you most of the time, but I was thinking about you in this area of living as a householder and family. And I just actually love how since I first met you, I remember you talking about being a dad and just how proud you were of being a father. Actually, you just always spoke with such pride about Eve and Millie, and it's just very beautiful to hear that. And yeah, I just see what an important practice that is to you. And of course, yeah, we're very fortunate because now they're part of our Sangha as well. So how delightful that you've actually brought your family into the Sangha as well. Yeah, so over to you, Jyotida.
Thank you, Kusaladevi. Great to be here. I'm going to start it off by a quote, and the quote is, "Household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open." So that's when I'm starting off, that household life is dusty and crowded. And I'm wearing my robes tonight, and I'll probably make it a bit clearer why I am later on. But so my household life started when I was 19, quite surprisingly. I met Carolyn, my wife, and Amelia came along a few months later, and we decided to get a house, and we jumped in this chaotic moment of just getting a house and going for it. It all happened quite spontaneously. I didn't choose it to happen particularly. I definitely was involved in it, but it just how suddenly manifested itself. And we'll talk a little bit about that period of sort of this period of me prior to coming to the Buddhist Centre, because it gives me some context to work with when I did arrive at the Buddhist Centre and where I'm at now. So there's something about having the starting off like that. I mean, I remember I was on the YTS. People here old enough will know what the YTS is, and it was earning about £29.99 a week. So suddenly I had this daughter, a wife, and a house, and I realised that I'm going to have to get some work done here to go and keep this house going and support the family. And I was sort of the main income breadwinner. So I really knuckled down on my job in dentistry, making teeth, and I really focused on it, and I wanted to become the best I could be at it. So put a lot of time, and that my life and that career started to progress. I started to get more money as I could ask for more money because I was doing a certain quality of job. And in some ways, I remember I was thinking about those times now, and I can remember lovely moments of just sort of me taking the girls to the shops just to go and buy a magazine with like a toy on the front or something, and then going on holiday to Cornwall. And a real simple life, even like me and Carolyn we couldn't have no money, but we could afford one bottle of wine a week, and we'd sit down and play a game of chess and listen to Simon and Garfunkel, trying to be all cool. But there's these real, like, soft, lovely, beautiful moments, I think, of those times. And it's quite simple, actually. But that simplicity didn't last. What happened is that I kept wanting more. I wanted life to be better for myself and for the family. So that would mean a bigger house. So we moved into a house, a bungalow, which I'm still at now. I wanted more money, so I got better position at work. And then that wasn't enough. I set up my own business, and I thought I can do this better and earn even more money and provide more for my family and go on more holidays and do more things. I do want that big TV. And that kind of progressed, actually, in all sorts of ways. So at some point in this, I had like my family life, which was beautiful and wonderful, with my daughters, Amelia and Eve. And me and Carolyn have always had a very good relationship, very easy relationship in some ways. And that was going really well in the level. But I had this other side to me that was becoming more distant, more disconnected. And it was so gradual. And I didn't really notice it, to be honest. And I can remember at one point, I decided to change career within the profession. So by that time, I had my own business. I employed quite a lot of people because, again, I wanted more and more. So I employed more people. And that brought all sorts of, again, bigger stresses on. And then I tried to change profession. And I used to go down to London and got trained as a clinical technician. And I can remember at one point being down London with these guys and, well, these people, these women, a group of people, colleagues. And I was in a bar and I was acting in a way, and I saw myself in a mirror. And I thought, I don't recognise that person there. That person is alien to me. He was greedy, gregarious, selfish, loud, boisterous. Really quite ugly, I thought. Well, I can remember coming back thinking in night time, I felt quite ugly tonight. And yeah, and I can remember being actually alone one night at work around about 10:30, and I called the Samaritans. Now, I wasn't feeling suicidal, I don't think. Oh no, I wasn't feeling suicidal, but I needed to connect to somebody. And I had no one to connect to. I felt distant from my wife and my family because I wanted to be responsible and protective of them. I felt distant from my friends because they was all in the same club as me. And I had no one to talk to. I was incredibly lonely. And I just talked to some stranger on the phone, and I just expressed how I felt. And she didn't say anything other than to listen to me. And then when I put the phone down, I can remember a sense of relief, of like just somebody heard me, a neutral person. And yeah, I mean, there's other stories that happened after that, but it's that kind of level of disintegration. When I came to the Buddhist Center, me and my wife actually came together to the Buddhist Center for both of us for certain reasons. That was a sort of life wasn't working in one way or another. So when I came to the center, wow, talk about evangelical. That's how I felt. Suddenly, the stars were brighter, the moon was shinier, the grass was greener. Nottingham was full of people wandering around like Shangri-La. Everything suddenly shifted and changed it. I thought, my goodness, this is amazing. Why has no one ever told me about this? You know, I did the introductory course, and I was like, by the end of it all, I thought, oh my goodness, I found something like this jewel. And so I literally went asked to become a mitra pretty quickly after about a year. Then straight away asked for ordination. And in that, there was something about, definitely I knew I needed to look at myself. I know the island of me. I needed to go to myself and investigate what was happening. At the same time, I was treating my Buddhist practice a bit like my life previous to that. You know, I just want change. I want to move. I want to get something out of something here. And there's something about that when, this is the difficult part, when I came back home and brought that energy into my household, my wife doesn't practice. She was incredibly shocked. You know, she was fearful. Basically, Buddhism turned into another woman, really. What is going to happen? Am I going to run off to a community? Am I going to leave it? Am I going to leave the house? Am I going to give up everything and just say I don't want any possessions and run and just move away from everything? And I can remember that was really difficult because I used to go on retreat and come back, and my wife would be upset with me. But what that meant was we had to really, really talk about what we both found meaning in life. We both had to go a lot deeper than we ever did in previously, because we was just on a boat to wherever, I don't know, wherever land I was going to. And that was difficult. It's not easy. It was not easy for me, and it's not easy for my wife. But in some ways, because over that time, there's one thing that was fundamental in my life, was my love for my wife and my children. But at the same time, I knew this new love had come into my life. And I can remember going to retreat and talking about the mandala. And the mandala, you know, I went to the retreat and it says, you need to put going for refuge at centre of your mandala. And I was like, well, where's the wife and the kids got to go? You know, what am I going to do? I'm going to go back and say, I'm sorry, you need to be out of the mandala, you know, or the other side of it all. And it was a very, very linear view of what going for refuge is. It was looking at it in a very top-down sort of view. And, you know, in some ways it was difficult because my wife only ever saw particularly men who lived in communities. She didn't really see men that had families or living in families. And there is more now in the Nottingham Buddhist Centre. And it's certainly in the tradition as a whole, there's a lot of people, and I'll bring that up again a bit later. So she was threatened by that, but yeah, so we had to dig deep actually as a relationship. But there's something about actually my action spoke louder than my words. That is the important thing. So how I started to act. So in that time, my dad died and my wife got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Both of those times were testing points for us, myself, and relationships. And that time, we both stood together. And I was actually so, so grateful that I was more open than I ever have been in my life, more connected to my wife and my family and beauty, that I was able to engage in all those moments more wholeheartedly, less distracted. And I think those are the sort of shifts that really made a difference and sort of affirmed to Carolyn what I was doing was not anti-family. It was actually something about engagement. It's engagement and connecting even more with family. And that's what has happened. So I went on, and this is why I put this on, because I'm so, so grateful for Triratna. So grateful. So I can wear this robe. I don't go out in the streets wearing this robe. I don't get to work wearing this robe, but I can wear this robe, and it takes me back to that month I had away on retreat and ordination where I was with my brothers, and in the mountains, sitting there looking at the night sky. And I felt deeply, deeply connected that this was the right path for me to go for Refuge for the rest of my life. My perspective had shifted and changed completely. The compass had gone from magnetic north to south now, and it was always pointing that way. And it felt so natural and so right, but it felt like my family was with me and they was around me. And this is something we can do together. And this is the real miracle of it all, really. Just as I think actually in the times prior to me actually engaging with Triratna and Buddhism and going for Refuge, I was thinking as I was having a certain corrosive effect on the family. And it was having an effect where I think if it had carried on, it wouldn't have gone well. But just as this has had a real positive effect on the family. So like Kusaladevi mentioned, so Eve has asked for ordination. And so she's off on retreat at the moment. My other daughter she comes along and she loves Buddhism. And Zach, partner Eve, he's living in the community now. So there's sort of this real mysterious sort of energy that's spread out. And it's by deeds and being, So in some way, the original quote, household life is crowded and dusty. I admit household life, but it's no longer crowded and dusty. Actually, my old house now, the other day, is full of contentment and stillness now. I'm married. I've got a roof over my head. It's a simple life I can live now. And recently, last year, I changed my jobs to a job that I wanted to do, which is a better expression where I could practice more fully in my job, help and support people with learning disabilities. And that is something that I can do because I've had the support of my family and I've had the stability in my life. And in some ways, it frees up a lot of space for me to dedicate my life and practice to others. And there's something about going into the world which I could have a whole new talk about, but it's like going into the world as a bodhisattva and getting stuck in. That's what I absolutely adore and love, and I can do that. So, thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Jyotida. Yeah, wonderful. Engagement, getting really stuck in. Yeah, just that love, openness, being able to be there even more for your family. Just really, really beautiful. Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Good. So finally, we've got our third treat, which is Padmasakhi. So yeah, I've been fortunate to be friends with Padmasakhi for a few years, and I was just thinking about Padmasakhi when she got ordained and how there was around that time before her ordination and since then, how there's been a real sort of natural expression of freedom, lightness, joy, beauty, commitment. And yeah, what's happened is for her, that's continued, and it has progressed in a particular direction, which I think she's going to say more about now, but it's just been really moving to witness that. So yeah, over to you, Padmasakhi.
Right, just got to sort out screens here because I can't look at myself through this. Oh, I'm afraid I'm a bit short, so you can't actually see the caser, but I'll put it up there. I'm not tall enough. So, yeah, you may, the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that my kesa is different. So it's not a sign that I'm in charge now. I haven't been promoted. It's not a sign of some spiritual attainment that I've gained, that they've given me a gold kesa. It's none of those things. There's no status in it. It's a choice and a way of my expressing my desire to go deeper in my going for refuge in a particular way. And it's the way of the brahmacharya. And it's quite interesting. I always, when I first heard this, I always thought it was a bit strange, brahmacharya. I thought of it as Hindu. But I've looked it up. The Pali word I have translated, this is Sangha from his essential Sangha. The Pali word I have translated as spiritual life is brahmacharya, which sometimes means celibacy or chastity. That is to say, abstention from sexual activity. But in this context, it has a much wider meaning. It consists of two parts. Brahma means high, noble, or best, sublime, and real. It also means divine, not in the theistic sense, but in the sense of the embodiment of the best and noblest qualities and virtues. And charya means walking, faring, practicing, experiencing, even living. Hence, brahmacharya means something like practicing the best or experiencing the ideal. And we could even just render it as just spiritual life. And I think the important thing is that the brahmacharya is that it's got a history in Buddhism. You could also talk about the homeless wanderer. And the other term that's associated with the gold kesa is anagarika. So I'll try and say this very carefully so I don't make a mistake. Because I haven't quite got used to the fact that this title is there, that feels like it's much too grand, but it's not. Just let me breathe deeply. So my official title, if I wanted to put all my letters against my name now, would be Dharmacharini Anagarika Padmasakhi. Got it right. So you might be wondering where the Anagarika came in. And that literally does mean homeless one. And it usually implies celibacy. So why have I chosen to take a golden kesa to follow this particular path? Well, I really enjoyed listening to Jyotida. And until a couple of years ago, I was living a householder life. I was in a long-term relationship with my partner, Lorraine. And yes, I've been there with the needing to just talk and dig deep to actually practice and it not to be seen as a threat. But since Lorraine's death, I've realized something else, which is that I really want to deepen my contentment in life. I'm not a very content person. I'm more content than I was, but I still have a tendency to be discontented. So the third precept. So this anagarika is the brahmacharya anagarika whole thing is about deepening my practice of the third precept: stillness, simplicity, and contentment. So there is an element of the state of mind behind which I practice, the state of mind behind which I live. So it's not very easy or desirable, really, in our society to go off and become homeless. It's not like India back in the day when there was a tradition of, you know, religious renunciants would be supported by the community to be homeless, to put their energies all into the spiritual life, not to be householders, not to have any responsibilities other than to practice and to teach. Well, we don't live in that society. So I think it's a state of mind that I want to cultivate, of stillness, simplicity and contentment. So I want to be more still in my heart, less craving. I want to live a simpler life. So that means looking at what I have here, and I have my own home, have quite a lot of things in it. And just looking at how I live and whether that's actually appropriate, whether I need all this around me. And to be content, to just be practicing with what I have. That doesn't mean I'll never change anything. It doesn't mean I'll never move. And one aspect of this whole momentum within me is that I will be trialing out to go and live in Kashavana, which is a small community that supports the ordination retreats for women in Spain. It's how do you say this? It's a real different way of life than I've been used to, and it's slightly challenging. I'm a little bit scared about whether I will be up to the mark for it. But it feels like that's expressing what this gold caser is showing, which is that need to simplify my life, that need to be more focused and content. I really want to move towards less partiality. So I don't want to say I like you because you're nice to me, or I like you because you love me, but I don't like you as much because I don't care about you because you're just a bus driver. I don't want to be like that in the world anymore. And having a significant other, having a sexual relationship, to me has been about that person's more important than anybody else in the world. So I'm part of what I'm intending to do is actually not go down that route anymore. I don't need to make one person special. I don't need to be special to one person. And I think I just want to be able to love in the world much more freely. And because of within our movement, it's understood that the anagarika is usually, I don't know if it's always, but it's usually a celibacy as well. It means that if I express affection and love to people, it's understood the terms on which I'm expressing them. So I was going to actually read that quote that Jyotida did, because somebody sent it to me about the householder life, but I won't reread it again. And I'll just say a couple more things. I've got a couple more minutes, I think. So at 29 years of age, I actually did go forth before I even knew what the term meant. I left a long-term relationship and I walked out with just a rucksack. I left everything else. And yes, it was traumatic, and yes, there was a lot of pain. But I have never felt so light of heart. I've never felt so content as I did at just having so little to be responsible for, at having so little to I could just move, I could just be wherever I wanted to be. I was free in a very, very significant way. So that's part of this as well. And I think I'm going forth. At 60 years of age, I'm having a second going forth. And it's wonderful. It's scary. So I had at the weekend, there was a women's order weekend, and I became an anagarika, and I took this kesa and I put it on, and I chanted the refuges and precepts in front of the Buddha on my own, in front of, I didn't know how many people, because it was a hybrid event. I was terrified that I would fluff my lines. And something very magical happened to me. And it just validated the decision I'm making. And I can't explain it very easily. So I wrote a poem, which might give you some idea of what I went through on that when I was chanting the refuges and precepts. As I kneel before you, nerves vanish completely. Suddenly, I'm so close to you. Everything else fades into soft focus as I gaze at your compassionate face. A strength of commitment, a clarity of voice. I go for refuge to you with all my heart. You fill my world completely. My heart's wish is to serve you. The precepts taken. Deep love pours through me. I am magnetized by you, connected within and without. My kesa, golden bright, a visual symbol of my vow to follow the brahmacharya way with heart and mind always, treading lightly, loving deeply, sharing freely.
Oh, it's really beautiful, Padmasakhi. And yes, it certainly did communicate something. Thank you very much. Thank you. Lovely poem. But yeah, for just, sharing your commitment with us in that way. Thank you. Good. So I just really hope that's given you a flavour of just a few of the many vast ways that going for refuge can be, that commitment can be expressed in our lives. And well, hopefully that will have communicated that commitment doesn't have to look a certain way. There doesn't have to be a particular lifestyle. It was very clear there that there were 3 people who are following their hearts, following their own individual paths. And that's what we all have to do, is seek out where our path goes. So hopefully we'll hear from some more people over the coming weeks. I think it'd be lovely to continue this series and just keep exploring how this commitment can manifest in various different ways. But yeah, we'll leave it there for this evening. So please do feel free to unmute and say goodbye.